I'm told that Dick needs to get laid before his presentation. So, Taisa, if you could do that, perform that function for us, that would be great. All right.
A Miley Lay?
There you go.
Where'd that come from? Thanks so much. That's terrific.
There you go. All right.
A Miley
Now that we've
Lay.
got that out of the way, the photo archivist here, Steve Wilkins. Steve, I don't know if you're here in the audience, if you could raise your hand. Steve has worked with Dick for the last week and a half on this presentation to make it possible. So I just wanted to thank Steve for his diligence in helping Dick cull tonight's presentation down from a pretty massive collection of at least a couple of thousand images that we have here. Well, Charlie Myers, who's a professor at Saddleback, has been working with Surfing Heritage Foundation for a couple of years now, and they have come down and diligently filmed every significant person we could get in-house. So Charlie Myers, the Saddleback crew, and Jonathan Jenkins, who's with Progressive Production Services.
Is there any pictures of you?
If we could give them all a round of applause for documenting what's happening here, we really appreciate that. They've done an amazing job. Dick Metz is a lot of things. Here are a few things that I could think of. Surfer, and I was doubting that until I saw the slides in this presentation. Explorer, entrepreneur, businessman, mentor, playboy, visionary, and founder of Surfing Heritage Foundation. Dick, come on up.
Thanks so much, and this Miley Lay is really a treat. The last time I had one of these on was the opening of the Hobie shop in Lahaina, Maui. And it reminds me, you said maybe some nude girls. And basically, it made me think of my cousin happened to be here tonight. And years ago, I had two Christmas cards. I had the family version and the X-rated version. And being my cousin, the family, I always sent him the family version. But what screwed up is one time he went to Aspen for Christmas, and I had sent the X-rated version to some old friends of mine at the Chart House in Aspen, and he's paying his bill, and he said, Jesus, that looks like my cousin in back of the cash register with a couple of nude girls. And so he called me from the Chart House, and he said, how come I didn't get that Christmas card? So I said, well, you're on the family version. I couldn't do that. So this is the family show. If any of you want to stay for the late show, we can always make the X-rated one. Well, I want to thank again for this Miley Lay. This is really a treat. I'm going to put this hat on because you're going to see it several times tonight. This hat is over 60 years old. I bought it in Tahiti in 1958. And I wore it around the world for 3 years. I've been wearing it on the beach ever since. And so there's several pictures of me tonight in that with this hat on, so I thought it was appropriate that I wear the hat. Also, here are the shoes, or sandals, that I wore for 3 years. They're made out of tires. I got them in Guatemala. I wore them around the world, and they still fit. I had them on today. But I just want you to know these have about 30,000 hours on them, so a lot of time. Anyway, those are just some of the props, but we'll get into that as I get along. Well, this is where it really started. This is Laguna Beach, downtown Main Beach, 1929, and I grew up literally on this beach. For those of you, I'm going to pinpoint, right there at the Union gas station on the corner of Broadway and the Coast Highway was the original office for the Union gas station. In 1937, I'm going to show you another picture, but they moved that, and that became the lifeguard tower in Laguna, which is so famous now in all the pictures. Now, why don't, oh, there. This is just another shot of downtown Laguna in the early 30s. Right here where the Ford garage is now where they're building the new lifeguard station. not the tower, but the lifeguard station. And this building was a dance hall. In those early years, Stan Kenton and Harry James, Tommy Dorsey all played in Laguna on Friday night, and then they'd flip-flop with the Rendezvous in Balboa on Saturday night. So we might have Tommy Dorsey on Friday and Stan Kenton on Saturday, and they would do the opposite at the Rendezvous. In those days in Laguna, at 2 in the morning, you couldn't walk down the street, the main block, for the crowds that were there. It was just a happening place. You've got to realize in these early years, life changes so fast, it's unbelievable. But this was during the Depression, in the heart of the Depression. And there's always people that had money that came to the dances, but at the same time, there was a lot of people that could hardly make a living and actually lived on the beach, lived from the ocean, and those were the guys that kind of grew up in Laguna that I knew. Most of you probably didn't realize that there was a pier in Laguna, went over Bird Rock, and in the early 30s, it was decommissioned because there was a lot of holes in the planks, and then in the big hurricane of 1939, the pier collapsed and all washed up on the beach. So the Laguna guys, and I'm talking about Heves McClellan and Peanuts Larson, I'm going to show you pictures of them, Rollo Beck, Bus McKnight, these were all the guys older than I that literally lived on the beach and made their living from the ocean, from diving, from surfing. Well, they didn't make it surfing, but from diving and fishing. Then they would trade fish for food, and when the pier went down, all those timbers washed up on the main beach, and not like it is today where you have to have 1 million permits. In those days, you just took the lumber and built a house literally on the sand at the main beach in Laguna. That's Peanuts Larson and Heves McClellan, and this is a later picture, but I wanted a picture of the two of them together. They were great friends, grew up together, and you know, in this time in the era of Laguna, it was really an art colony, and there was a lot of characters. Movie people came there. People lived there that were different and unique, and certainly Peanuts Larson was one of those that was definitely unique. He never really had a job, and I've known him since almost the day I was born. My dad, I'll show another. I'm going to skip around a little bit, but the lifeguard tower now is right there. They moved it from the gas station right over here, and my dad's restaurant was called The Broiler, which was right in back of the lifeguard tower. Now, all of you know this whole strip now is all grass, but that was all houses and businesses in the 30s, 40s, and it wasn't until I think it was 65 that they condemned all those buildings and tore them out and put the lawn in. This is in the 40s. We were all surfing on redwood and balsa boards, Pacific Home Systems. These are all guys I went to school with. Herb Elke, David Tompkins, this is Anderson. These are all guys that were a couple of years ahead of me in high school. But these boards I have one of them over here in the rack, one I learned on. And this was taken at Thalia Street in 1946. Most of these boards would weigh from 80 to 110 pounds. And you just left them at the beach because nobody was strong enough to carry them home. This is my dad's restaurant right here called The Broiler. This is the lifeguard tower is right at the end of this sidewalk. This was Loyne's drugstore, and we had the donut kettle, and the dance hall was right about here. So I literally grew up on the main beach, and Heves McClellan and Peanuts were living on the beach and diving, and like I say, it was during the Depression, things were tough, and my dad told him one day, if you watch the kid, meaning me, and I was like 5 years old or 6 years old, watch him so he doesn't get in trouble or drown or something, and I'll give you a hamburger and a beer at the end of the day. Well, they couldn't have cared less about me, but I was their meal ticket. So every day they would come by and ask where I was, and this was all in the summertime, and they would take me, whatever they were doing, they'd put me in the rumble seat of a Model A and go to Doheny and San Onofre and surf. And they would take me to out on the main beach and go on a dory, and they'd go diving. And about 5 o'clock, they'd turn me in and get a hamburger and a beer. So I grew up right there on the beach with these two guys who were much older, but they really became like my best friends, and Hebbs McClellan I was partners with in business for 25 years, and we had a great time together and a super relationship. This is Salt Creek, if you can recognize that. There's no houses in the background. And this is there again, all the guys I went to school with, Joe Sullivan, Fran Delaney, Parkin Cosby, Bob Kellogg, there's Tompkins again. And there again, these were the boards from the 30s and the 40s. And surfing really stopped during the war. I mean, there was gas rationing. The older guys all went off in the service. There was actually barbed wire on the main beach in Laguna. So everything came to a halt. But right after the war, the economy totally changed. Then it was no longer a depression. There was jobs, and everybody was making money and having fun and partying and playing. And that was the era that I was fortunate enough to grow up in. This is an early picture of San Onofre. You'll recognize the cliffs and the cars, of course, but these are the boards that were all laying on the beach and all weighed, like I say, 80 to 110 pounds. They're mostly Pacific Home Systems at that time. We've got several examples of those here in the foundation. So during that time, the lifeguards were really this is where the life was on the beach. This is Herb Elke shaping a surfboard right in front of the main tower in my dad's restaurant. That's Charlie Plummer getting a haircut. And life, you know, in those days, today is so different. I tell friends of mine, I just can't believe how it is. There's no resistance to prices on whatever something might cost. In these days, it was all about money because you didn't have any, and you lived off the land. You'd collect bottles that were 2 cents on the beach, and the lifeguards, at least in my case, became my mentors, and they were all, you know, 17, 18, 20 years old, and I was like 8, 9, and 10, and they would teach you not only how to be a waterman and surf and dive and row a boat, make a surfboard, but they also were really great people to guide your life. And I can remember a couple of times, well, that every day they would have me walk up and down the beach where there'd be girls on the beach having a Coke, and a little kid could lay in front of them and ask them for their Coke bottle when it was empty, a lot easier than a 20-year-old could. So they'd have me hustling empty Coke bottles for a 2-cent deposit, and I'd bring them back to the lifeguard tower. And one day, a couple of girls had gone into the water, and there was, I think, a nickel and a couple of pennies on their towel, and I scooped that up and took it back to them, and they said, hey, it's all about the bottles. You never steal money. Take that back right now. And they gave me a really lesson in life, and I thought I was being a hero grabbing 7 cents, but they told me the right and wrong of living on the beach. And it was a bit of a con game. There was certain things you could con each other out of, but there was a line in the sand that you didn't go over that. Now, there was always somebody like Peanuts that went beyond the line, but by and large, it was a great learning experience just being on the beach with these older guys. This was San Onofre in 1946, Parkin Cosby, you know, the old shack, and that's... what was his name? Cardo. Who? No, that's Cardo in the back. This was the president. He was a dentist in San Clemente. Barney Wilkes, exactly. So this is the early life that I grew up in, and going to school was really an effort because I was having too much fun. I mean, the lifeguards really gave me more of an education than I ever got in school. They'd teach you the right and wrong. They taught you about girls, which I didn't know anything at that age, and they certainly taught me how to party. And that was a great learning curve because there again, you know, you didn't have any money, and so it was always, how are you going to get a date and make it work? You couldn't take a girl to a restaurant. You never had a date and went to a restaurant for dinner. So what we would do, there was a pet store in Laguna on Forest Avenue, and they sold fresh horse meat for 27 cents a pound. And so we would buy a pound of horse meat and tell them we're having a steak and lobster feed. So we would get all kinds of girls, and the guy that could bring the most girls to the party always got an extra couple of drinks. So the whole social scene was built around how you could get girls to the party and get wine and food for next to nothing. And that was the lessons that I learned that have carried me in good stead through the years. I know you won't recognize this, most of you, some of the older guys will, but right there where that water tank is where the bar of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel is today. And this was the Young brothers, were two grouchy old brothers that lived in this hut and drank beer all day long. And there was a road that went right in back of this shack down to the bottom of Salt Creek that you could drive on, an old dirt sandy road. So you could park right on the beach and surf there. But you had to pay a quarter to get in. Linda, while you're up there, pick up that pole. So the Young brothers would sit in that cabin, and when you'd drive by, they'd stick this pole out the window, and there's a clothespin on the end of that pole, and you had to put a quarter in the clothespin, and they would snake it back into the office, and then you could drive down on the beach. So we're fortunate to be preserving history here, and that was the quarter snatcher from Salt Creek. That was my first car, a 40 Chevy, and in those days, of course, there was no surf shops. There was no, anything even remotely related to that. The boards were made on the beach by individuals. You traded for them. And this was my new Velzy board I got from Dale under the pier in the Manhattan Pier in 1950. And these racks, there was no racks, so you had to make a rack. Those were 2x4s that I put carpet on with big bolts through them, and you nailed it to the roof of the car. And you took out the back seat and put a keg of beer in the back seat, and went to Santa Onofre for the weekend. You had a keg of beer, you could sleep in the car, and you had your surfboards, and you were home free. That's the way we worked. So about 1951, Hobie grew up in Ontario, went to Chaffey High School, and his folks had a summer home in Laguna, happened to be right at Oak Street, and so Hobie started coming down. He was 5 years younger than I was, so he was still in high school making surfboards in his dad's garage. He saw us surfing, and Walter Hoffman showed him how to shape a couple of boards, and Hobie was a super craftsman. So he made a few boards. Actually, he thinks about 90 boards in his dad's garage before his dad got so pissed off that he drove to Dana Point. Now, Dana Point was not a town. There was not even a post office. There wasn't a building in Dana Point. And he first built, I'm sorry, I've got to go back. He built this two-car garage, 20 by 20. And he said, you guys go to Dana Point and make all the noise you want because you can't making surfboards in my garage anymore. So we added this front room, and this became our clubhouse because this was on the way to Santa Onofre. Now in those days, because of the boards we had, you couldn't surf all over like you can now. You could surf at Doheny and Santa Onofre, and by this time, the boards were getting a lot better. These are balsa boards now. See, fiberglass was invented by the English in the Second World War, and so it wasn't until 1946 that fiberglass became available. Up until then, you had the boards made out of mostly redwood with a little balsa wood to protect them. So once fiberglass was available, the whole board could be made out of balsa wood, fiberglass with a double ounce of 10 ounce cloth, double layered, and they were pretty well protected, and the boards went from 100 pounds to 40 pounds. So it was a huge lowering of the weight, and it allowed a lot more people to surf. So this was the first ever building that was made to make surfboards in. And this became our clubhouse, and we hung out there and drank beer and tried to get chicks in there and have parties. And you can see right in back of this, well, wait, I got to go back. Right up here is where the Lantern Bay Shopping Center is today. And there was snakes and rabbits out there. We used to shoot rabbits and ride motorcycles out there. And this is our whole life revolving around this. Now, by now I had gotten out of college, or maybe I was still in college. No, I'm 51, I was still in college. And so I'd come down and patch surfboards for Hobie, and Grubby worked there. And we've got a couple of early Hobie employees here. Sandy Banks is here, and Dave Boyle, and all these guys worked at the Hobie shop one way or another in those early years. I'm going back to the main beach in Laguna in the 50s. So here's now the lifeguard tower as you know it today. It's been cut down in size. There was, in these early years when I lifeguarded, there was 3 stories. The ground floor, then right in here, there was a next story that didn't have any windows, and then up here was the lookout. Well, we soon figured out there was no really, the city didn't monitor the lifeguards. I mean, the lifeguards, you just had to live in Laguna and you could be a lifeguard. There was no swimming test. And this inner story here had no building, no windows, so we'd have a party in the middle building because the cops, when they'd sit here on the sidewalk, could never see that we were drinking in the middle center. And so after about 4 years, they finally figured out that we were half drunk in here most of the time, and the city cut this roof off right here and only made it 2 stories. But this was my dad's bar right here. So this is where I literally grew up from the time I was born until I was out of college. So this was my front yard, my living room, everything about my growing up was really done right here. Once I left Laguna, I went to Chaffey College, and then I got a scholarship to Redlands. I got kicked out of Redlands, and I thought the only place for me was Santa Barbara. So I went to Santa Barbara and graduated from there, but didn't have any money, so I moved into a chicken coop. And this was a chicken coop that I lived in for the first semester, and it got a little cold in the wintertime, so I bought this smudge pot. And fired that up when it got too cold in there. Now, when I lived in Santa Barbara in 1950-51, there was only 3 surfboards in town. And we'd go to Rincon almost every afternoon or in the morning and not go to class, but you'd call the other 2 guys that had the surfboards. See, we had no wetsuits then. Wetsuits hadn't been invented. And in Santa Barbara in the wintertime, the water's pretty chilly. So we would get up there and you'd share a board. Whoever would flip, and the guy that lost the flip had to start the fire and maintain the fire where the other guy went out and surfed. So there was only 3 or 4 of us surfing, but every now and then we'd call, Matt Kivlin, Joe Quigg, and the guys from Malibu would come up. And this is, actually, that's Joe Riddick and Dick Barr. These are guys from Santa Monica that came up with Simmons surfboards. And there again, our mentality, you can't realize it today, but our mentality, we had no money. I mean, literally no money. And you couldn't afford a 10-cent long-distance call to Santa Monica. So we would call person to person on, let's say Matt Kivlin's phone number, and I would call person to person to Mr. B. Swell. And Matt would pick up the phone, and the operator would say, "Is Mr. B. Swell, this is person to person." Matt'd say, "No, he's not here." And I'd say, "Well, when do you expect him back?" And he would say, "Well, we think he's going to be there about 6 to 7 tonight." That meant 6 or 7 feet. If it was 15 minutes after the hour, it meant it was a little windy. And we would go to great efforts to save a dime. Now, this is Billy Ming building a fire. Billy and I, on my first new surfboard, I got $20 for Christmas in 1950 from my mom, and I told Ming, I said, "We got to get another surfboard." So Billy and I drove to Hermosa Beach in Manhattan, and Henry, that's your old stomping grounds, but probably before you were born. Velzy was making boards under the Manhattan Pier, and we bought a brand new Velzy balsa board for $40, and we shared it. Ming came up with half price, and I came up with half price, and we would build a fire and surf out here all day long by ourselves because there was nobody other than us that had the surfboards. Then finally I got out of the chicken coop, and we rented a house on Miramar Beach, and this is that Dale Velzy board. And see, we didn't have any trunks then. These are cut-off Levi's. There were no beach trunks long before OP and Hangtan and all the rest of them. And, before surf wax, we're using a candle and waxing your board, and it would surf right in front of the house there. And we surfed there every day, and we hardly went to school. But I did manage to finally graduate after 6 years. It took me 6 years to get out of there. But this is, every day there was waves there, and it would just be Billy Ming and I. And we went around the corner one day looking up and down the coast, and this was Hammond's Reef. And this was the Hammond Estate, and that was the Hammond Estate house up here. And our house was right around this corner at Miramar Beach, and this was all Hammond's. So, God, the waves were really neat there, but they didn't break there very often. So we surfed there as much as we could. Nobody even knew about it. And we made the fatal mistake of one day we were down at Malibu, and we ran into Dewey Weber. And Dewey was about 15, couldn't drive then. And we invited him to come up, and we showed him Hammond's Reef. And a couple weeks later, he got some older guys in a van and brought 15 guys from the South Bay up to Hammond's Reef, and it ended our little hideout spot. Well, right out of school in Santa Barbara, I got drafted, and I was at Fort Ord and Fort Sill. This is Fort Sill, Oklahoma, on a bivouac, cleaning my rifle, and I wasn't fit for military service, so I actually had a car wreck where I'd broken my back earlier, and whenever they put a pack on my back, I would pass out, so I got a medical discharge in 7 months and 5 days. And but I stayed in for if you're in for 6 months, you got the GI Bill. So, you had to work the system, and I was working it to the nth degree. So 7 months and 5 days, I got a military discharge. I got the GI Bill. I bought a new car with a mattress in the back and moved in the back of the new Ford van, and got Matt Kivlin to make my new board. That was a Matt Kivlin balsa board that he made at the Sip and Surf Bar in Santa Monica. And I bought a fifth of Jim Beam I'm holding there. And I was on my way to having some fun. Well, right away, since I had the GI Bill, I said, well, I'm going to Mexico City and go to graduate school. I hardly got out of regular college, but going to graduate school is a total joke. But I figured the GI Bill was paying, so I went down there. We took our Aloha shirts, and we started having a Hawaii party. So that's me and my girlfriend at a big luau in Mexico City. So I was there for 6 months, learned how to use a Bota bag. And so I was having we were on the GI Bill. It was so cheap in Mexico then. I got $26 a week on the GI Bill, paid for the apartment. We had a maid that cooked and cleaned, and I could fly to Acapulco every weekend on $26 a week. So I was living high, drinking too much wine and having too much fun. So I thought, this is really neat. I'm going back home and go to Hawaii. So I got on the Lurline with the GI Bill, and for $80, you could go to Honolulu on the Lurline. So this was my early trip to Hawaii. I got to Honolulu, and this is Jerry Lynn and Billy Ming, and that's me, Captain Ice Cream. This was a World War II Army Air Force pilot that had been in a prison camp in Germany for 4 years, and he had gotten out, and he was making his living selling ice cream out of a wicker basket on Waikiki Beach. And I was living high because I had the GI Bill, but he didn't. So I was living better than he was, and he was selling ice cream. So we had this Model A, lived on 217 Liliuokalani in the summertime in Honolulu, and then went to Waikiki every day. And this was our group at Waikiki. This is, of course, now there's houses and little hotels there, but nothing big there. That's Neil Frank from Santa Cruz, Steamers Weimers from Santa Cruz, that's me, and this is Susie from Newport Beach, and this is where we hung out surfing Waikiki. And then in the fall, this one, I didn't know what was coming up next, but that's Tommy Zahn. In the wintertime, it would get really rainy, and we'd go tea leaf sliding. So this is Tommy's on tea leaf sliding up in the Waikiki, Mahina Heights. So in the wintertime, we took the Model A and went out and lived in Waianae in a Quonset hut. And this is Waianae, or Makaha Beach. Of course, now there's high-rises all over. This was our Model A, and that's me on the fender, and Steamers, Weimers, and Herbie Nolan over there, and a couple of local kids. This was a gun that we shared. It was a balsa gun that we just shared because we didn't have any guns. The rest of us just had regular balsa boards. And that was me surfing Makaha by myself on a bitchin' 6-8 foot day, and nobody out. You know, you're all by yourself. It's lonely out there when you're by yourself. Well, I spent a year in Hawaii, came back to Laguna, and this was our group, and this is at Brook Street in Laguna. That's Peanuts Larson, Billy Higdon, Flippy Hoffman, Jocko, that's my girlfriend Joyce, that's Bud Hedrick, a famous California bullfighter, Bob Casey, Harlow Richardson. So I had an apartment right here at Brook Street and was tending bar at the Sandpiper and the Coast Inn and surfing all day. That's me at Brook Street on a second reef day. That's not a Photoshop. That's me in a little red jacket tending bar. And in those days I worked, there was no 5-day a week. You worked 6 days a week. You worked from 6 at night until 2 at night, 8-hour shift. You got paid $10 for tending bar for 8 hours. So it was like $1.10 an hour. And to get a tip, the drinks then, a beer was 10 cents, a glass of wine was 15 cents, a bar drink was 40 cents. So if you got a nickel tip, it was like a big deal. So, you know, your tips, maybe now they're $100 a night. You know, maybe if you're lucky, you'd get $2. So what we decided to do, I rented a house in Laguna because I was the only one that had a job. And I was a big spender, but the guys that I lived with that were lifeguarding or just living on the beach would come in at night, and the girls didn't mind talking to the bartender, but they didn't want to get picked up at the bar, so I would get to know them and could introduce them. And then as the drinks came back to me, I would take a gallon jar that olives and cherries came in, empty it out, and if it was vodka and gin, I'd take the ice out and dump it in one bottle. If it was scotch or whiskey, I'd dump it in the other bottle. And my roommates would come in about 10 o'clock, and I'd have a full gallon by then. I'd introduce them to the girls at the bar. They would take a jug of either vodka and gin or whiskey and scotch home, and I'd tell the girls I'd be there shortly, go on home, and by the time I got there at 2 o'clock, everybody was out of their gourd. This was just some of the parties I came home to. By then they were, I was on the floor by then myself because I had a head start. Sandy, you might recognize Carol, and that's Boris Allanen. And I can't remember her name. I should remember. I dated her for a while. This is the first Brook Street surfing contest. And Tom Morey, who's right here in the front row, is right there in the white trunks. That's Hobie Alter, Rennie Yater. This was our football coach, Red Geyer. And let's see, who else is there? I can't see. That's White Gone there. And Boca. And Hoekstra in there too. So that was the line. This is the longest continuous surf contest in the world, apparently, what they say. So that was the first one. I think this was in 1955. This was Hobie. This is Hobie is his best. Hobie is so talented and so creative that, you know, the rest of us were just trying to have fun. We were trying to get laid. We were trying to get some waves. But Hobie was really serious about inventing stuff. And, you know, he made great surfboards. And this was early on, long before windsurfers were ever even thought of. And Hobie grabbed an umbrella off the beach at San Onofre one day and took his tandem board and went out and tried to be the first windsurfer. This was a typical day at Brook Street and Oak Street. That's Marge Calhoun. She was one of the early girl surfers. Flippy Hoffman here, Shorto. There's Tom Young. This is Diane, Mickey Munoz's first wife. So some of you might recognize some of these other people. So about that time, by then I'm about 30 years old. I had gone 6 years to college. I'm still surfing every day in Tenon Bar, and my dad finally said, "Don't you think it's time you get a real job?" And I wasn't sure about that, but he owned a liquor store in Huntington Beach, and he said, "I think you better get your butt up to Huntington and run that liquor store." So I said, okay. I went up and took my board up there in the liquor store. I renamed it Surf Liquors, and it was right on the corner of 5th and Ocean, right across the street from the pier. So I opened the store at 9 o'clock every morning and got my surfboard, and I had a couple employees, and I thought all I had to do was count the money. And I'd get my board and paddle out to the second tee and start surfing. This is Harold Walker of Walker Foam, and that's Dick Thomas, and that's me. So every day I'm surfing the pier, and all the Huntington Beach Grimmies are watching me get out to the second tee, and then the underage guys would go in my liquor store and get Betty. I had one employee in there, and get her a little confused, which is pretty easy. And they would steal extra bottles of wine. And so that's why I have this board here. So I'm going to fast track. I'm doing this for several years, and they're stealing booze every day. And I was so stupid, I wasn't sure how much they were stealing because I didn't really care. I was going to the bullfights in Tijuana every weekend. I was going skiing on the other weekends, and I thought all I had to do was get a check at the end of the month. Well, after a couple of years, I realized that not only the store's going broke, but everything connected with the store's going broke. It couldn't pay me anymore, and I couldn't pay the wages. And so I finally fired everybody, moved in the liquor store, and by then I was starting to dawn on me that there's got to be a business sense to this. And so I started counting the money and going to the bank and working the store 12 hours a day. I think George Strimple is here. He was one of my early customers at the store. And a guy named Johnny Miller was making sandwiches in those days in Long Beach. And he'd make these pre-made sandwiches and drive down the coast, and he'd wrap them up and throw them out in front of the different liquor stores. And then you could buy them during the day for, like a quarter. And by the time I'd open the store at 9 o'clock, all the wrappings were there, but all the sandwiches were gone. And all my buddies who were surfing would leave a little note and said, "Sorry, I was hungry. I'll pay you next month. And here's my IOU. Send me a bill." And so Johnny Miller finally went broke because I couldn't pay him. So I finally fired everybody, like I said, took over the store, and started reading the Argosy and True magazine. And some of you older folks might remember those two men's magazines were adventure magazines that told about guys going on great adventures to the South Seas and climbing mountains and doing all this neat stuff. And I'm in this liquor store 7 days a week I slept there. And I ate Johnny Miller sandwiches 3 meals a day. I didn't leave the store. And I'm trying to pay off the bills. And all those lessons the lifeguards taught me about being responsible started to hit home. And so I saved all the money, paid the bills, and I'm eating these Johnny Miller sandwiches, reading about these adventures in the South Seas. And I'm looking at these pictures, bare-breasted maidens in Tahiti. And I'm thinking, God, if I ever get out of here, I am gone. There's no way I'm going to do this the rest of my life. So over the next couple of years that I lived there, in that store, paid off most of the bills, and finally Disneyland is opening in Anaheim, and they needed a liquor license. And in those days you had to buy a license in the county that you were in. And Tony, you'll remember this well, as Tony Orser right here that I went to early school with, helped us get the liquor license. That was another liquor license though. But anyway, I sold the store and the liquor license to what did I say? The club there, and so once I sold it, I paid off the bank, and I paid all the bills, and I had $1,900 left. And I sold my car for $50 and a television called a Hoffman Easy Vision for $10, and that's when I started my real trip. But before I left, this was called the Skunk Works in Laguna Canyon, and this was where all the foam was made. This was Grubby Clark's, ended up being the Clark Foam Factory. What happened is Hobie and I and Grubby were all working at the Dana Point store, and I was just patching occasionally, and Hobie was trying to sell foam blanks that he was making, but nobody else would buy them, and because they were Hobie's blanks. And so Hobie said, Grubby, you go down and make these blanks down in this place, and you can call it Clark Foam, you can call it whatever you want, sell it to whoever you want, and you don't have to pay anything for it, but you got to sell me the blanks for $1 cheaper than everybody else. So Grubby really inherited the business, didn't cost him a nickel, and all he did was raise the price of the blanks for $1 to everybody else, and Hobie got his $1 cheaper, and Grubby paid nothing. So this is where all the first blanks were made. And I was the first employee there as I was getting my visas and my shots to go to Africa and India where I was going. So this was just before I left. And then I hitchhiked from Laguna down through Central America to Panama. And the only way to get to Tahiti in those days, there was no airport there, was to get on some kind of a ship or a sailing boat and get to Tahiti. So I went to the French foreign office there, the embassy in Panama, because the French were fighting in Viet Cong then. They were fighting the French Indochina War, and they were taking French foreign legionnaires from Marseille, France, through the Panama Canal to Tahiti and then on to Vietnam. And for $80, I got on this ship that was carrying French foreign troops to Tahiti, and I lived with French foreign legionnaires, and I couldn't even come on deck for 17 days from Panama to Tahiti. Now, I showed you about Peanuts Larson earlier and told you a little bit about him. This guy was really out there in left field, and that, oops, I'm sorry, I pressed the wrong button. That's Peanuts Larson right there. I left Laguna, hitchhiked to Central America and Panama, didn't know when I was going to get to Tahiti or if I would. There was no telephones. I don't know when I'm going to get there. And I'm on this ship and end up tying up in Papeete early in the morning. And all these folks it was a big day whenever a ship came in Papeete. And Peanuts Larson, as I said earlier, was a different kind of a guy. He talked as if he always wanted to be a pilot. And if you would see him on the street, he wouldn't say, "Hey Dick, how you doing?" He'd say, "Haleakala, control tower 6-9, prepare for landing." He talked like he was a pilot ready to take off or land. And most of the time you'd see him on the street, you'd kind of hide because you didn't want to go through this routine of a control tower. And Peanuts had left before me, and he had gotten on a sailboat in Newport, and he told his girlfriend Frances, he never had a job. He always lived with Frances, with his lifelong girlfriend. She worked at the crab shack in Newport and financed him. And he said, "I'm going to go get a loaf of bread. I'll be back later." And he went down, got on a sailboat, and went to Tahiti. And I didn't know he was in Tahiti. Now, another thing Peanuts did, he liked to talk. He thought he was a seal. And so if you would see him sometimes, he'd go, and give you the seal call, and you'd go back, and so you'd never talk to him normally. You'd always be barking back and forth. So I land in Papeete at 6 in the morning, and there's all these people, and back in the background I have another picture. He's a guy, I didn't know it was even him then, is standing on a 55-gallon oil drum, and they tying up the ship, and I hear, and Peanuts comes out of the crowd, And I've got a visa to get off in Papeete, and the police chief and the mayor, this is the mayor. Peanuts grabs the mayor and the police chief, comes to the gangplank, and all of a sudden I hear my name over the loudspeaker. Monsieur Metz, you're the first one off the ship. And I get off the ship, Peanuts grabs me, and I had no idea it was there. And so he takes me right across the street to the most famous bar in all of the South Seas, Quinn's Bar. And I had read about this in True Magazine, and this is where I wanted to go. I knew there was bare-breasted maidens in here, and this is where a guy could score. There was no doubt in your mind about that. And I intended to score. So you get in this place is unbelievable. I mean, everybody's drinking, and the Tahitian girls, they like guys that the more screwed up you could get, the drunker you get, throw up, fall down, pass out. They loved you. So I was going to make some points right away. And the first thing, I got in there and drank a couple of bottles of Hinano, and I saw there was some curtains in the back where I assumed the head was. So I went back there to use the John and went through, and I thought, well, there'd be a guys and a girls. There's no guys and girls. It's all one big urinal. And you walk in, and it's a tiled room about 10 feet square with a metal grate over the tile floor and a drain in one corner with a little Chinese guy sitting on a box at the one corner, squirting a hose down toward the end. And so you go in there, there's no urinals, there's no toilets, there's no anything. It's a square room. And you go in there, and the girls, the Tahitian girls, love it when they can tell a new haole has come to town. And so they decide they're going to go in there with you. So they go in, and you're unzipping your pants, trying to look coy and get in the corner where nobody can see. And the girls are pinching in the butt, and you're trying to take a leak. And it's not going to happen. And they're laughing, and they think that's so funny. So it took me about a half a day to get in the mood of this thing. And I soon learned what the technique was. So right away, I bought a motorcycle from a French sailor. And they love that because they love to fall down. If there's a fight, they like to see not somebody hurt bad, but a little blood is great. So if you fall down in a motorcycle and you're skinned up, that's great. If you get in a fight in Quinn's and get a bloody nose, that's great. They want to nurse you back to health. So right away, I got the motorcycle. This is the hat I'm wearing now. And I bought a Hinano and started going. The streets are not paved, so there's sand on the street. Every time you go around the corner on a motorcycle, you're going to go down. And the girls clap and laugh, and they're all skinned up too, but they think it's really bitching. So I'm having a lot of fun in Tahiti. And there's a lot of stories I can tell you, but I got to keep moving because I stayed in the Stewart Hotel with Peanuts Larson here for about 4 or 5 months. We surfed around the island, went to the other islands, and it really was a South Sea paradise in those days. And I finally, this is over on Moorea, this is Cook's Bay. I went over there, I heard Leetag, the famous painter that did velvet paintings, lived here on Moorea, on this bay here, Cook's Bay, and he had a house there, and he built the most famous toilet in Tahiti, and it was a 3-hole toilet that was open on 3 sides, so people would come from all over the different islands in Tahiti to use his john because this was the greatest view that you could get in the island. So this picture was taken from a 3-hole toilet that I was sitting on of Cook's Bay. And people would socialize. They'd come just to sit on the john and talk and get up to date. Well, after being in Tahiti for about 4 or 5 months, I was having a great time, and I got in a bet with a guy, and this was a Norwegian ship Sazi Maritime that came in and was just a tramp steamer taking coconut and papayas and stuff to different islands. And this other American had tried to get off the island, but there's no way to get off when you want to go. And he tried to get on this ship, and they wouldn't take him. So I bet him $50 that I could get a job on this ship. Now, this is what I was referring to earlier in my Laguna career and learning from these lifeguards, how to con people. There's a way you can con your way into things, and you can be an idiot and just walk up and say, hey, I'll pay $300 to get a ticket, and they even threw him off at that price. I said, I'll bet you $50 I can get a ticket on that ship. So he was happy to bet me. I said, the only thing, you got to give me the $50 now, and if I don't get on, I'll be right here and I'll give it back to you. So I went up and I just had a little rucksack with a couple of trunks in it, and I had my passport, and I went on deck and asked for the first mate, showed him my passport. I had a visa for Australia where they were eventually going, and I laid that $50 where my visa was, and I said, I intend to get on this ship and work my way, and here's my visa, and here's a little treat for you. And the first mate saw that $50, and he said, you really want to go, don't you? And I said, I intend to go. And he said, well, put that $50 away. You can hire and work as a workaway. And I said, well, that's terrific. When are we leaving? He said, we're sailing at 4. And I said, well, I've got a friend. How about getting him on board? Well, if he's a good worker, bring him on board. So I went back to Quinn's Bar and I said, for $100, I can get you on. So I got $150 and got on for a free ride all the way to Australia. Well, it took us about 3 months to get there. We went to the New Hebrides, Samoa, New Guinea, all through the South Seas, and finally ended up in Sydney, where I signed off. And this was Manly Beach, and I ran into a couple of surfers and stayed here and surfed here for 3 or 4 months and went to Freshie and Curl and all the places in Australia. And my intention when I left Laguna was to go, I had 5 places that I wanted to go. And the rest of them were up for grabs. I obviously wanted to go to Tahiti and see bare-breasted girls. I wanted to go to Australia and surf. I wanted to go to Africa and see wild animals. And I wanted to go to the Olympic Games in Rome. And I wanted to go to Pamplona and run with the bulls. So this was my second target, Australia. And I'd watched the papers. And by the time I got here on this Norwegian ship, I got to know the skipper pretty well. This was a freighter. There were no passengers on board. And I asked him before we got to Sydney, I said, would you write me a letter of recommendation? And he said, well, my English isn't very good. He said, you write the letter on my stationery and I will sign it. Well, I couldn't write near as well as Steve Pesman can, but I wrote a glowing fucking report about that I was one of the greatest sailors in the world. And he stamped it and signed it. So after being in Sydney and Australia for 3 or 4 months, I watched the papers and I saw another Norwegian ship was going to be in the Sydney harbor. So I went down and asked to see the skipper, showed him my letter, and I still have the letter. It's from a Captain Salem. And the skipper of this ship said, oh, Captain Salem, I went to sailing school with him when we were teenagers, and you work for him, come aboard, you're welcome. So I got on board there and sailed up the coast of Australia through Bali and Indonesia, and finally got off in Singapore. And from Singapore, I hitchhiked up the Malay Peninsula and into Thailand. This was the great Royal Palace in Bangkok. They got a hell of a gardener there. Look at the way those trees are trimmed. And from Thailand, I hitchhiked into Vietnam, Cambodia, across Burma, and eventually India. This is in Calcutta, India. I could do all 10 hours just on this trip, but I'm trying to show you a lot of different stuff today. So this was India in Dalhousie Square in Calcutta, and they really do have not only snake charmers, but guys laying on nailed beds and climbing ropes that aren't going anywhere. It's unbelievable. And of course, I had to go to the Taj Mahal. That's me sitting in front of the Taj Mahal. And I got a train ride. I discovered, there again, learning all these techniques from early being in Laguna, I discovered that the trains, I'm hitchhiking. It's not easy to hitchhike in India. There's not that many cars. So I discovered that in India there's all these classes. And there's the untouchables and there's the Hindus and everybody's a class. And the trains all have different cars for different classes. And in those days, India was an English colony, and everybody was very English and very honest. And I discovered when you went in to buy a ticket, your wardrobe determined what class you were. So if you were an untouchable, you were really grungy, and you bought for 1 anna, you could buy a ticket and get in this really grungy car. And if you were a stage up, you paid a couple more anna and you got another car. If you were a haole guy, you paid more and you got on the best car. Well, I paid an anna to an untouchable to get him to buy me a ticket, and then I got on his car. And it cost me nothing. I mean, an anna is like 2 cents. So I rode the trains of India to Benares and Delhi and New Delhi and all over India I didn't spend a dime riding all over India on the trains, because I would go in on the ticket of an untouchable and go in the car of a white guy. But the last day before I got to Bombay, an inspector got in my car and you can't walk from car to car in those trains. And he got in and asked for my tickets, and the only ticket I had was an untouchable ticket. So right away he put me in jail, in the Bombay jail, for a day, and I bribed my way out for $10. So I got out of jail and got on this ship, and I wanted to go across the Indian Ocean to the Seychelles Islands and on to Africa. So this is the way I got to East Africa, and ended up in Zanzibar and Mombasa. And then I hitchhiked up the coast to Nairobi. And on the way to Nairobi, there's a lot of wild game. This was just one of the elephants I saw. And I finally got to Nairobi, and I spent a lot of time in East Africa. I was months there. I worked for different safari groups, would go out on safaris and work for them. And finally I wanted to go to Victoria Falls, and I asked how to do it, and they said, oh, the Great North Road. You just got on, it goes right to Victoria Falls. And I thought, well, the Great North Road, it sounds like, Coast Highway 101. And I got a ride. The road in Nairobi was kind of paved, and about 2 miles outside of town, it turned into this. And we would drive all day long and maybe go 100 miles. And have to throw gravel and boards and the shovels. And anyway, this is the Great North Road. And I got a ride along the Serengeti Plains. This is a great male lion that, I was on a Jeep, and I was, 10 feet from him. And another lion had just made a kill. I could have reached out and touched him. He just, once they've made a kill, they're tired and want to take a nap. And they're not ferocious at all. So I saw him kill a zebra, and once they've chowed down, they're totally harmless, or at least they seem like they are. So there's some bare-breasted maidens, but not quite what I had in mind. But it was a start anyway. So I get to Victoria Falls. A guy picked me up, and we rode all through Tanganyika. Now Tanzania and the Rhodesias, and he's going all the way to Cape Town. And I had no intention to go to Cape Town, but we arrived in Victoria Falls in the middle of the night. We were driving 24 hours a day. His mom was sick in Cape Town, and we traded off. He would drive for 2 hours, and I'd drive for 2 hours. So he was driving, I'm asleep, it's midnight or so. We get to Victoria Falls, he wakes me up, and he says, this is where you want to get out. And I looked out the window, it was the middle of the night, and there was a couple of little fires around a hut going, and I said, where'd you say you were going? He said, I'm going to Cape Town. And I said, I don't need to see Victoria Falls, let's go to Cape Town. So I made a decision there that changed the lives of a whole lot of people, and you'll see why in a minute. So you got to understand, Africa is 4 times bigger than the United States. So when you say you're going from Nairobi to Cape Town, it's like going from Laguna to New York and then to London and back to New York. I mean, it's huge. So finally I get to Cape Town, and obviously this is an air view, but this is downtown Cape Town in the harbor, and this then is Sea Point, Camps Bay, Bakoven, and these little beach towns, kind of like Laguna, but they're right close to the main town. This is called Kloof Neck. This is Lion's Head Mountain. So I ended up meeting John Whitmore. He was surfing right here in Sea Point. John Whitmore, some of you remember The Endless Summers, the guy with a little goatee. And I got off and from this guy. He went to the hospital that was right here to see his mom. I walked down the street right here, Glenn's Beach actually it was, and I just wanted to go to the beach. Now keep in mind, I'd been gone from home for 1.5 years. My hair was down to my shoulders. I had a full beard. I'm in sandals, these sandals I got on here. I'm wearing this hat. I've got a torn Olympic shirt on. And I've been in the sun. I'm blacker than a black is. And I walked down there, and this one guy in the water on an ugly surfboard on a little bitty wave that wasn't 6 inches, a bunch of kelp, and he's fallen off, and the board washes up on the rocks. And I go down and grab his board so it wouldn't get dinged. And he kind of swims up, and I said something like, "This is probably the ugliest surfboard that I've ever seen." And he said, "Well, what the hell do you know about surfboard?" I said, "Looking at this board, I know a lot more than you do." And he said, "Well, where are you from?" And I said, "Well, I've lived in Hawaii for years and some Southern California." And he said, "Oh, God, you got to come home with me." So he was a Volkswagen salesman, as you might remember from the early movie. And he took me home, and he lived in Bakoven, which is right here. And it's a neat little cove with some surf and diving right in front. And by the time we got there, he called his wife, Thelma, and said, "Call our mates, we're having a braai." This is John Whitmore and his wife, Thelma. And we became lifelong blood brothers. I've never met a guy and attached to him so completely as I did him. And it was the same with him because I represented everything that he wanted to know. He had made a surfboard from a picture of a Pan American calendar in 1938. You might remember those old Pan Am calendars. They had a picture of Hawaii, a picture of wherever they flew. There was a picture of Waikiki with a couple of surfboards. And he had tried to make a surfboard from that picture. And here I come from California and Hawaii and could tell him about the whole thing. There was no magazines then. You got to realize there was no surf movies then. There was no surf magazine. Surfing was non-existent. I mean, in California then, there was probably only a couple hundred surfers. And in Africa, there was 2. He and one other guy. And when I got there, it made 3 of us. So he was just enthralled with having me there. But he had 2 daughters, and he's working selling Volkswagens to make a living. And so I just fell in love with this place. It's the same parallel that Laguna is. It looked like Laguna. There's a rocky cove, sandy beaches, surf everywhere. And while he would go to work in the morning, I would drive around and surf and dive and just wait till he came home and we'd go surf and I'd show him how to make surfboards. And I was not a manufacturer. I'm a lousy surfboard maker. But compared to him, I was looking really good. Okay, this is Camps Bay. And this is Bakoven. So this is very similar to Laguna. This could be the main beach, and then you go around by Brook Street or in there, and they're diving and rocks all along here, and certain times of the year there's surf all out here. This picture I took from the top of Table Mountain, which was right up in the background. So I lived right here with him for 4 or 5 months, and part of the reason I stayed there, his wife's little sister was 17 and a junior in high school I fell in love with. There she is. Patty was her name. And this is on a little surfing trip we made. And so that's Table Mountain. Cape Town is right here. And they lived right over here is Bakoven. And this is a big bay. And around here there's more surf over here. So Patty and I would pick her up after school. And we'd come over here and the 2 of us would lay on the beach and go surf. this were the two boards we had, and there she's got this hat on that I'm now wearing, and that's me giving you the finger, Tony. And that's a pair of M-knees, by the way. M-knee, well, that's a whole other story, but you all know about M-knee in Honolulu. And before I left Honolulu, M-knee, I had ordered 3 pair of M-knees, and I said, I'm leaving on the Lurleen the next day. I mean, I ordered them 3 months before, and he didn't make them. And I told him I was going to leave. And M-knee, we had a big party in the Lurleen. That's when there was no security. All the Beach Boys were on there. And M-knee drove all the way from Waianae, walked up the gangplank. He's a one-legged Chinaman, you got to understand that. Walked up the gangplank on his one crutch, and he brought my 3 M-knees. And this is one pair I was wearing at that time. This is some surf out at a place called Komaki. These boards were so fat and were so hard to paddle and were so ridiculous, you had to get in the whitewater before you could even catch a wave. There was a ton of kelp there. It was like Laguna used to be, with all this ball kelp. And so, you know, you'd get tangled up in the kelp whenever you'd get a good wave. Finally, after I'd stayed there for 4 months and tried to leave a couple of times, and one time I left and wrote a note, and John felt I was going to leave, so he went to high school and got Patty out of school, and there's only one road out of town, and I'd taken the bus and gotten through town, and I'm sitting under a tree. You know, there's no cars. One time in Africa, I waited 11 days for a car even to come by. And so I'm sitting under a tree. That's another pair of M-knees. That's an orange pair I had. That other pair was white. I just realized that. Anyway, I'm sitting out there, and John, I see a Volkswagen coming in the distance, and it's John and Patty. They drive up and say, you can't leave now. You got to get in the car. We're having a party this week. So I get back in the Volkswagen and stayed another 6 weeks. But he finally got me a ride with a friend of his, and I rode up on the way up the coast to East London. And this was this is John Whitmore. That's his wife, Thelma. That's her mother. This is Patty, the dog, me, and John's 2 daughters. And by then, we'd made a couple more boards. These are made out of styrofoam. And in order to get glass to stick to them, we had to use shellac. Tom, you'd know more about this than I do, but fiberglass wouldn't bond to styrofoam, and you couldn't shape styrofoam. So they're real square-railed. It's all soft and big cells, and you couldn't shape it with a tool. And so they were just ridiculous. But we made a couple of them, and, you know, we did surf on them, but it wasn't very good. So after that, I headed up the coast, and this is in Durban. I got to Durban, and this is, whoops, I'm sorry, pushed the wrong button. This is Harry Bold. That's me, Jack Wilson. This is Baron Standler. These are all guys that I got to know and later became, when I came back to America, I made all these guys distributors for Bruce Brown and Severson. Harry Bold wrote, and he's written to Pesman in several articles. I think Steve has been in the Surfer's Journal, but he now lives in New Zealand, and I talk to him once a week, and we're great friends. But I met him here on the boardwalk, and these were the boards they had. They were paddle boards. They were hollow, and they leaked like a sieve. And this was a new one that Harry had gotten. And I said, can I borrow one of your boards? And so Harry was the first one to let me use his board. And I put some wax on his picture. And God, he got all upset because I was waxing up there. And he said, what are you going to do with the wax up there? And I said, well, I'm going to try and do a Paul Strauss Stretch 5. And so I took it out, and they're all laughing. They said, it's never going to work. You're going to pearl and everything. So they all stayed on the beach, and I went out by myself, and I got lucky because I wasn't that good a surfer, but I did a cheater Stretch 5, and they all grabbed their boards and waxed up on the nose and came out and thought they would do the same thing. So we got to be great friends, and they wrote articles in the paper, and the mayor came down and actually gave me the key to the city because of, you know, it was a big deal for him. You know, nobody had ever been there before. And this was in 1959. So it was 5 years later that Bruce showed up there. So The Endless Summer was made in '64 after I came home and talked Bruce into going over there. So this was, you know, a long time before they'd seen anybody else. This is at J Bay. That sign says Cape St. Francis. This was on another trip. I was there in this car, but I just put that in there because of the sign, really. This was a trading post, Cape St. Francis. This was the only building there. Now, I don't know, some of you guys have probably been there, but there's condominiums all over the beach. It's, you know, it looks like Waikiki now. But when I was there, that's me sitting there petting the dog. This was the general store, and I slept on the beach there for a week surfing there by myself. Finally, I left the coast, and my intention was to go back up all of Africa and go to Europe. And on my way, I'm just hitchhiking, and it was gotten a giant storm, and it rained for about 3 days, and I couldn't get a ride, so I went in this hut. These 4 girls lived in the hut, and they invited me to spend a couple of days with them, so I lived in this hut with these 4 girls and their one little kid. I don't know whose kid it was, but it was okay. We got rid of him real quick. On the way up, you know, you're driving along in jeeps and trucks and working for people. I worked out for different safari groups. This was a big baboon that jumped out of a tree and jumped on the hood of the car, and I took it through the windshield. Okay, this is the same hat I'm wearing right now. I got a ride on the top of a cotton truck. This is in the Belgian Congo. And that's me on the top of the cotton truck. This is a guy holding a live rooster that we had for dinner that night. And we're just going through the jungle on the top of a cotton truck on my way to, I wanted to go to the Ituri forest where the pygmies were. And here they are. So, you know, I'm not all that tall, but that's how tall they are. You know, they're like 3'6". And, you know, they're unbelievable. I mean, you know, they literally are living in the jungle, and the poor girls, they stretch their boobs purposely. In their culture, the longer and the flatter your boobs are, the prettier you are. And so I found a couple of ones that weren't so pretty by their standards, but looked pretty good to me. And I've got a whole bunch more pictures, but I didn't dwell on this because this is the family night, not the X-rated show. But before I went, I was in a town in the Belgian Congo, and I bought some, a guy had a box of Fleur's Double Bubble, and I bought a whole box of Fleur's Double Bubble gum. And I took it to the pygmies, and the pygmies, they didn't know what bubble gum was, but I'm blowing some great bubbles, and I start passing out the bubble gum to the cute little girls that had real firm little boobs sticking straight out, and they're trying to blow bubbles, and they weren't, I mean, I'm trying to sell them on me. I didn't care about them blowing bubbles, but we're doing a lot of barter work there. So I hitchhiked all through the Belgian Congo, Uganda, Nairobi, up through all the countries in Africa, Nigeria, and finally get to Sahara. And I got to a little town of Juba in the southern Sudan, and I stayed with an English pastor there that had a little church. And he had been there for all his life, or 20 years or so. And he said, as long as I've been here, no white man has ever crossed the desert here. He said, the only way to get across is on these desert government transport trucks. So one happened, I waited there about 7 or 8 days, and one came through. This is a Sudanese government desert truck that has big tires on it. They don't have a speedometer. They have a compass, because they just chart their course across the desert. And these are extra cans of gas right here, and then they have 55-gallon drums up here that they siphon from here into the tanks there. This is me, and this is the truck driver. And we started across the desert. Now, this is the early part of the desert. As I went across the desert, it turned into sand. And I started out in my shorts and a t-shirt. I thought, well, I'll get a little tan before I get to the Mediterranean. It was 130 degrees in the daytime, and at night it would freeze. It got below 32. And the temperature changed so fast that the skin on my face would crack and bleed during the day. And we couldn't drive in the daytime. It was too hot. So all during the day, we laid under this truck and looked at the differential for 8 hours before we could get in the truck and drive at night. So this is really in the Sahara, and this was a camel caravan that we ran into, and before we got to Cairo. And this was, again, before Cairo. This is the Valley of the Kings. This is where King Tut's buried, and all these big caves are where all the tombs are. And Thebes, the ancient city of Thebes, is here. And then I got a ride down the Nile River to Cairo. And eventually, I'm speeding it all up here because I don't want to bore you guys too much, because there's still more coming. I've got a couple of topless girls. I want to keep the guys awake. So I hitchhiked from Cairo across the Mediterranean to Istanbul, across Turkey, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, Romania, finally got to Europe and went on to Pamplona. And I ran track in college and high school and thought I was a pretty good runner. So the first day, this goes on for 8 days, and they drink all night. A glass of wine cost a penny in those days, so you could get drunk really cheap. And you're awake all night, and 7 in the morning, they let the bulls out. They fire off a cannon at 6:45. The streets are packed, and everybody runs when the cannon goes off. So really, when the bulls really go, there's only 4 or 5 guys that run right with the bulls. And I thought I could start at the beginning and run till the end. See, the whole purpose of running with the bulls is to get in the bullfights free. And being from Laguna, I didn't want to pay to get in the bullfight, so I was going to get in free. But the first day I discovered I couldn't outrun the bulls. It's about 1/4 mile. I couldn't outrun them and get in the gate. The gate is closed till the bulls get there. They open the gate, the bulls run through, and if you're not right with the bulls, you don't get in. So the second day, I started about halfway up, and this is the day I started halfway up. I'm hanging on a stairway. They had these little lofts and decks and steel stairways that would drop down. And I happened to be hanging on a stairway, took this picture, then I dropped down and ran with the bulls the rest of the way. So, I mean, I just had a little dumb camera. This is not a telephoto lens. I'm shooting this over my shoulder and running as fast as I can. So I ran every day with the bulls, and I got in 5 of the 6 days. This was the biggest bull of the whole time, called a Mira bull. And what they try and do, all the students, the bull ring is right over here, and the gate is closed, and they form a big dog pile. And literally dozens of kids will get on a dog pile on top of each other. They're all drunk, and try and stop an individual bull from getting into the bull ring. And so then the bull doesn't know where to go, and he comes back down the road, and the guys all have red kerchiefs around their neck. And this is where a guy has a chance to make the big leagues in bullfighting. So they jump over the fence, get in here with one bull, do some cape work, and if the right guy sees them, he will take them to bullfighting school, and they'll become a matador. So this was one of those bulls that was kept out of the ring. Now, I'm right there. That's me with a camera. Now, this was in a postcard I saw later on that I happened to be in the picture. And this bull chased this guy over the fence, and then he turned around and came back down toward us while I'm taking a picture of this guy going over the fence. And this is the only time I didn't really get gored, but he ripped this sandal off my foot and cut the bottom of my foot as I dove over the fence over this side. So going to the next party was at the Oktoberfest in Munich, and these Germans know how to throw a party. I mean, this is the biggest party in the world, man. There's a lot of girls in here, and the whole point is to get them drunk, and then you can, if you get drunk, you go up and lead the band, and it's kind of like Tahiti. If you make a fool of yourself, they love you. So I went up on the bandstand, and I don't know anything about music, but I led that band in a big oration of all kinds of music. I don't know what they're playing. They don't know what I was doing, but it sure was fun. We had a great time here. I finally got on another ship and sailed back to New York, and ended up in down in the hippie square of New York. And this was an old friend of mine, Chad Burton, right here, and he was trying to be an actor. And I phoned him up, and he introduced me to this gal, a hippie gal in New York. They lived in a cold water walk-up flat, and so I moved in and spent a little time in New York and tried to get a little culture. So as soon as I got home back to Laguna in 1961, I left in 58, got back in 61, and Hobie and Bruce and Phil and some of the people here tonight, we all went down to Wayne Schaefer's house, and I showed the X-rated series of this picture show, and convinced Bruce that he ought to think about making a movie where I'd been. So it took him another 3 years to get geared up and finally go. I hooked him up with John Whitmore and Harry Bold and all the guys that I lived with in Australia and South Africa. And eventually, obviously, he followed my trip and did it in 6 weeks and filmed The Endless Summer. After I got back, I'm back in my original apartment in Brook Street. That's Brook Street right here. And I thought, well, since the culture where I've been has been topless, I wanted to incorporate that in Laguna. So all the girls I would try and convince that it was topless time in Laguna, and if you were going to come party with us, you had to be topless. So that was Lady Allison from England that showed up one day. So then Hobie, I was back tending bar, and Hobie called me one day and he said, "Hey, you got to come with me. Let's go back to Hawaii. You like Honolulu, and we need to have a store over there." So Hobie and I got on an airplane, and this was in like 1961 or 2, and in those days we could fly on the airplane. It was a DC-4, and you could carry your surfboards and put it in the aisle of the plane. And we had 2 surfboards in the aisle, and every time the stewardess went by, she'd hit the fin and knock it over and say, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that." And now, it's like there's so much security you can't even take a board on the plane, I don't think. So this was a Kapiolani store, 1475 Kapiolani in Honolulu, the first retail surf shop in the world that was just retail. Hobie made all the boards. We made no boards there, and I just sold them retail. Hobie had just made this sign. He's so talented. He put this sign, he made the H like it was supposed to be, and I took this picture of him after we hung the sign. And the first employee that I had here is here tonight, Earl Smith. You better raise your hand. I don't know where he is now, but Earl was going to Punahou. He was about 15, and he came down to the store, and he said, "I got to work in this store." And I said, "Well, I can't hire anybody, so you can work for nothing if you hang these posters." So I send Earl out all over Honolulu stapling posters for Bruce Brown's movie. The first movies we showed were not The Endless Summer. They were earlier movies. What was it? Slippery When Wet and some of those other ones. So Earl did a great job, and he had more sense than I did. I threw all these posters away, and I told him to throw them all away, and he didn't listen to me. And years later, when I started the foundation, he come up here and called me. He said, "I got some treasures you're glad I saved." He had rat-holed these for 40 years and brought them up and donated them to us. That was the front of the store, the original store on Kapiolani, and that's this is the first store, a surfboard shop. I mean, they weren't there. We had nothing, no clothes. There was still no clothes made. Before Hang Ten, before Surfline Hawaii, all I had to sell was a little resin and a patching kit. And I had just made, right there is a Hobie t-shirt that I had taken over from Dana Point, which says Hobie, Dana Point, California, and I asked Hobie if I could make Honolulu on it. So I took it down to a silk screener in Honolulu and screened Honolulu, Hawaii on it, and I sold those things like hotcakes because it was kind of a badge of showing that you had been to Hawaii, and instead of saying Dana Point. So that was the beginning of my retail career. Now, after I'd been there a couple of years, I hooked up with Dave Rockland, and he was totally the brains behind this. He was working for SINCPAC, which is a military base up on Pearl Harbor, and he wanted to work at the Hobie shop. And I said, God, I can't afford you. I'm making $10 for selling a surfboard, and there's no way I could survive and pay him. But he didn't want to work for the military anymore. And so I used to go surf with him every afternoon, and actually this is him right there. And this is Paul Strau, who's here tonight. That's Butch Van Artstalen, Freddie Hemmings, Peter Balding, and these are all the little girls around the Outrigger Club. I can't remember their names. That's May Balding right there in the front. So one night at Dave's house, we're having dinner, and his wife, Kenui, is taking a pair of pajamas, striped flannel pajamas that he had, cutting the legs off, and she was sewing on the dining room table while Dave and I were eating. And Dave said, God, these are great, but I'd rather have them in an Aloha print. And he said, why don't you go down to V. Johnham tomorrow, which was a wholesaler in Honolulu, and buy a yard of Periu cloth, like this stuff, and make them out of that. So the next day she did, and jams were born, and this was the first shirts that were reversed. And so we took this print and reversed it and made Aloha shirts like I've got on and still wear, and I have all the original ones. So Dave didn't have any money, and I didn't have any money, but I went to the bank, and Tommy Hain, who was a surfer and volleyball player at the Outrigger Club, was the manager of the Kapilani branch. And because I owned the Hobie shop and was doing okay, he said, well, I will lend you on the Hobie shop $50,000, which was like $5 million to me then. And so Dave and I owned the company, and we started Surfline with that $50,000. And what happened, Dave was really creative. I couldn't create anything. He was a lot like Hobie, very creative in a different way. And I'm more of a numbers guy. I just kind of want to look at the business thing. So I owned it and did the money thing, but Dave designed, and he called up, well, first what happened is the Makaha contest came along, and it was the first time they filmed it, live filming. And so I put Butch and Munoz and all the Hobie team in these jams. They had never seen them before. And so it was live on TV. And the minute it got live on TV, Life magazine saw it, and they phoned us one day at the Outrigger Club and say, hey, we like the looks of that. We want to come over and film that. And I don't know if you remember, Paul, because you were there, but we hadn't made but about 6 pair of these things. And we told Life magazine, Dave told them on the phone, oh yeah, we're a big company over here. We make women's stuff, we make guys' clothes, we make all this stuff, and we're going gangbusters, and I don't know if we have time to see it. Well, this just enhanced them. They fly over. We meet them at the airport, and they said, we want to see your factory. And we said, well, we'll take you to the factory, but we're going to take you to the Outrigger Club first. And we brought them to the Outrigger, and we started having Henry Specials, which was a special drink that the bartender made. And we got the Life magazine guys so drunk, they said, well, we'll see the factory the next day. In the meantime, Kenui stayed up all night and made girls' shorts and tops. And so the next day, we met him at the Outrigger Club, and we had lunch with him and started him drinking again. And we had a fashion show at the Outrigger Club, and eventually took him down to the Rock, down in Portlock, wasn't it, Paul? And took this picture, and we never did show them our big factory, but they thought we were a dynamic company. So this comes out in Life magazine. You couldn't buy this stuff. There was like 10 pages of this. And the next thing we know, a couple days later, we get a phone call from Lord & Taylor in New York, which is a great big department store, and they said, we just saw this ad in Life, not an ad, but the pictures in Life, and we want an open order of $10,000, and they sent us a check, and we said, well, mail it to the Outrigger Club. And they mailed us a check for 10 grand to the Outrigger Club, and this is all that we had made. I mean, we had nothing. We had no factory. We had Kenui sitting at the dining room table grinding out 2 pair a day. And they ordered a $10,000 order. Well, we spent about $3,000 of it buying drinks for everybody at the Outrigger. But this was my beginning of my clothing career. So after a while, I sold all that to Rockland, and he ran it, and his son Pua runs it to this day. And I continue to pursue my topless surfing career. So this is I don't know, somewhere over in Honolulu. I'm not going to tell you all the story there. The second store I opened was in Lahaina, and went over to Lahaina and took some surfboards. And of course there was some great surf there, but there was no surfboards. So I rented this building. This is Front Street. Now this is in 1962. This Front Street's still a dirt road. This is a building. This is a dirt floor. I hung this sign out. This was an early girl surfer named Claire Smith, who grew up in Malibu but lived in Maui. And she had just had her son. Right here, she's holding him. I took this picture. Spencer, I think I was with you when we talked to her son, who's now 55 years old and has that office across from your office. What's it? Brad. That's okay. That's Brad. Was Brad Smith at the time, and this was the first Hobie shop that he was almost born in. This was the first surfing trade fair. This is in Kapiolani Park. And this was the free runner of Action Sports Retailer, all the other trade fairs. And so I hung up a sign and brought a couple of chicks down and put a Phil Edwards model there and laid on the ground and drank wine, and we had a great time and sold a bunch of stuff. And in the meantime, I would fly over here. You know, in those days, you could fly back and forth. Airfare was $80 on the red eye from Honolulu to L.A. And I'd fly over in the wintertime and go ski in Aspen and go, you know, to the events over here. I hated missing everything in Laguna and Dana Point. So every time I heard there was a big party, I'd fly over and spend a week because I'd get new inventory that we didn't have in Hawaii. And, you know, like skateboards and surfboard racks, none of those were available in Honolulu. So it was a business trip, and I could write it all off and go ski for a week. And then we had the biggest event, and I didn't want to miss this, was there was a big competition between Velzy, and by then Greg Knoll and Bing and Dewey Weber were all making boards in the South Bay. And we were down in Dana Point, and they called us the Dana Point Mafia because the magazine Surfer was here with John Severson. Bruce Brown was making films in Dana Point, and Hobie was the biggest manufacturer. And I had several retail stores, so the guys in the South Bay started calling us the Dana Point Mafia because we did kind of control the media, the magazines and the movies. They all had Hobie surfboards in them. So Greg Knoll built his new factory, and he was really proud of it. And it was to be an invitation only and kind of a secret only for the South Bay guys. His big mistake was that he invited Hevs McClellan to be the master of ceremonies. Well, Hevs was my partner, and so he let it slip that this was a closed party, but it was at Greg's new event, building in Hermosa. So a week before, we all went down to the thrift store and bought 20 suits because nobody had any suits. And this is Mickey Munoz, Corky Carroll, Raymond Patterson. That's me. Who is this shaper for Hawaii, for Hobie? Logan something. Come on, Sandy? Logan what? Come on, your brain's getting, that's Phil Edwards, that's Bosco Burns. Jeff, maybe it's Jeff Logan, that's who it was. And that's Diane, Mickey's first wife, Heidi, Phil's wife. That was some of our dates, and so we hired a bus, and that's Bosco on the right. But we all dressed up like 1920s, and we bought little toy machine guns, and we'd take a bus because we knew we wouldn't be able to drive up and drive back and be sober. So we hired a bus that met us at, this was at Mickey's house on El Encanto in Dana Point. And this was about noon. We were supposed to be there at like 8 at night. We started at noon drinking, getting on the bus, and we decided we'd stop at all the famous bars on the way to Hermosa. And by the time we stopped at the Chart House in Newport, and I forget all the other bars on the way, but by the time we got there, the whole thing at Griggs had been going on for a couple hours. They were all in suits and ties, and we came in, and they had a big buffet, and we turned the whole buffet upside down and had a giant food fight. And it just Greg was trying to be really civil, and it just ended the whole thing, and it was a catastrophe. I have a whole bunch of pictures, but I didn't want to bore you with some of those. So this is out in front of, then Hez phones me in Hawaii, and in the meantime, Hez has been working for Guild in the Broadway liquor, and Hez phoned me and said, we got a chance to buy the Spigot liquor store in Laguna for 50 grand. And 50 grand, as I said, was like 50 million. And I said, well, I've got like 1,000. And Hez said, well, I've got 1,000. And so we weren't even close. But right after that call, I sold Surfline to Dave Rockland for 50,000. So I took the $50,000 check I got from Rockland, put it in a Christmas card, and mailed it to Hez. And he bought the Spigot liquor. I bought it, and he worked in it. And I flew over. And this was for the opening. We had a new Playboy pull-out, and Hez was smoking a new cigar celebrating the grand opening of the Spigot liquor in downtown Laguna. So during that time, Phil had married Heidi, and Heidi grew up in Honolulu, and so he wanted to come back to Honolulu. So he and I were talking, I forget where this was, but I hired him to come to Honolulu. And so Phil and Heidi moved back to Honolulu, and I set up a shop there, and I talked to Hobie, of course, about it, and I sold all the boards in the Hobie shop, and it said Phil Edwards, Honolulu. All those boards were made on Sand Island, and I sold them all through the Hobie shop in Honolulu. So after Phil was there for a while, and of course Duke was at the Outrigger Club every day. I got to know him real well. We used to surf together and hang out together. And this is Duke and his wife and myself and Phil. And we had just donated to Duke a new Phil Edwards surfboard. So he was surfing on a Hobie Phil Edwards at the time. So also during this time, there was a lot going on. I know I'm switching around, but I would make a few bucks, sell a few surfboards, and I had so much fun in Africa, I had to go back. So I've been back 10 times. So when I would get to Honolulu, I'd work for a year, save up 500 bucks. I'd get on an airplane because I couldn't take the time to hitchhike, fly back to South Africa. And this was one of the times I flew to Nairobi, rented a Volkswagen, took out the seat, and bought some canned tuna and peanut butter and drove out on the Serengeti. And I'd been there several times, so I knew where I could sleep in the car, and I just drove around on the plains and camped there. The first time I went, these are Maasai warriors. And the first time I was there, they were so mean and fierce, I watched them from afar burn 3 white guys at the stake for taking their picture. You didn't dare take their picture because they thought it took the soul out of their body. So by the time, this is like 5 years later, the whole culture had changed. They had gained their independence. And I come back, and these guys now are patting me on the back and wanting to talk. So I traded this guy my dark glasses for his spear. Now that never would have happened 5 years earlier, but he was happy to have the glasses, and I was delighted to get his spear. So his buddy, this was his buddy, I was in this Volkswagen, and they wanted to get in the car. I don't have all these pictures because I didn't want to bore you with some of these, but I gave them a ride, and I let them, Well, you've got to visualize this a little bit. You know how this is a regular little Volkswagen. I took out the other front seat. You know, the brake and the gear shift is between the two seats. And I'm driving on one side, and on the other side is just a box where I could stretch out and sleep there. So these two guys are sitting on that box where the seat should be. Well, they just have a cape around them. You know, they don't have any clothes. They're not wearing jockey undershorts. So the guy is straddling the brake and the gear shift. And every time I'm trying to shift into low gear, I'm not sure if I'm grabbing his schwanz or the gear shift. So we're driving through the plains out in the Serengeti, and this big moose here is the one sitting next to me. And he decided he wanted to steer. Well, we're in low gear, and we're only going about 10 miles an hour. There's no road. We're just driving along the bushes. And so I'm working the pedals, and he's steering. And we go up a little incline in the sand, and I give it the gas, and he turns it. And I grab the steering wheel because I didn't want to turn there. We wanted to stay out of the sand. And we rolled over. We were going so slow, we just rolled over on the side. It didn't turn over. It just rolled over on the side. But the spear here that I had sticking out the window, and it broke the spear. And so we're now sideways in the car. I'm on top of these two guys, and I got to climb over them to get out the window to get out of the car. And we rolled it over, just dented the fender, and I drove off and had a broken spear, and they still kept my dark glasses. So I get back to Honolulu. Now, this was 1968, and Hobie had invented the Hobie Cat by then, and he sent me 2 boats over to Honolulu. Now, I had never sailed in my life then. He flies over with number 7 and 11, and we put them together right at the airstrip. In those days in Honolulu, you could do all that on the airstrip. And we sailed from the harbor back to the Outrigger Club. So this was when I brought the 2 14s back to the Outrigger Club and put them together. And by then I took the Hobie stores and sold them to Jerry Lopez and Jack Shipley were working for me at the Hobie shop. So I sold them the Hobie shop, and they changed the name to Lightning Bolt. And I became then the Hobie Cat dealer for all the South Pacific and made my office really at the Outrigger Club, and just sold Hobie Cats and not boats. And I'd take outriggers over to the different islands, and this was in Kauai, and I'm there on the topless kick again. So if you're going sailing on the Hobie Cat, you had to be topless. So this is at Honolulu Bay, and I was on a sailing mission to sail Hobie Cats in Honolulu Bay. You know, that was just be one of my business trips. Back to Dana Point, then Hobie calls me and he said, you got to come over and run the Dana Point store. So this was the original Dana Point store here on the right, and I fly over and take over the store, and I said, and then moved the factory then down toward Capistrano Beach where it is today, and this became just a retail store. So I told Hobie, I said, we got to promote this. I got to run this the way I want to do it. So I rented this elephant, and I paid $5 to rent the elephant for a day. And so I rode the elephant in front of the house, in front of the store, and tried to stop all the traffic on Coast Highway to come in. And this was the whole crew at the Hobie store. Then that's Randy Etherton, Jack Cantu, Mullins, and I forget who this is up here, and that was my wife, Shirley. By the meantime, I'd gotten married. Well, I didn't get married till I came over here, but this was the Hobie shop, and I was learning to play the bongos. There she is. So I met her in Hawaii, and so she came back over here, and we got married, and I don't know what year it was, but I was 42 or 3, and she was 20. And so for the next 20 years, we ran the Hobie stores, and she was a big help. She was really good at buying the women's stuff and was totally successful in doing that. So in the meantime, I'm collecting surfboards from all my old friends, all these old redwoods. This one was actually Duke board. These were all boards I collected in Hawaii. And this was a store in the cannery in Maui, and had a real high ceiling. So I put all these boards in that store. And I saw people were kind of interested in them because nobody wanted these things. They were worthless. And so I collected some in Dana Point from all the guys that I used to surf with that are in here now. And this is Velzy's first bump board that he gave me and surfed on in Hawaii. And so I just started collecting them, and there was Dale. This was at St. Onofre one day. We're down there talking about surfboards and what to do with them. And he said, well, you ought to do a museum or something. So, another trip to South Africa. This is John Whitmore again. That was my wife, Shirley. We flew over. Like I say, I've been back and forth 10 times. And we were riding motorcycles, and this was down at Elands Bay, where John had a house. We'd surf there and ride motorcycles out of there. And then John, here he is here. This is at Phil Stubbs' house on Beach Road. That's Hobie, Walter, Bruce. No, that's Bruce. That's Wayne. Flippy. That's Alan Seymour, I think. Anyway, we're having a party there. And so John would come over and stay with me because he became, instead of the Volkswagen dealer, he was now the Hobie Cat manufacturer for all of Africa. He was the Bruce Brown distributor. He was a Surfer magazine dealer for South Africa, the Hobie surfboard manufacturer, and he was the man in the whole continent of Africa, and it was all through our chance meeting. And every time we were together, he'd say, God, I can't believe it. If you had gotten out of the car at Victoria Falls on that one night, you never would have gotten to Cape Town, we wouldn't have met, and I'd still be selling Volkswagens. So it was really it is amazing how life works out, and little turns or decisions that you make or don't make and somebody else makes them for you can change your whole life. And in this case, it totally changed Don Whitmore's life and changed mine too, because it's been a great relationship. I know all his kids. I've been back there, like say, a dozen times, and he's a great friend. He's since passed away, but a great guy. This was the opening of the Lantern Bay Hobie store. Me, Herbie, Mickey, Velzy, Herbie Elke, that's Peanuts Larson, Burhead, Hobie, Walter, Lauren. I forget who this guy is, but that was the grand opening of that store. And this also had a high ceiling, so I started putting boards of Burheads, and Lauren Harrison's and all those guys donated their boards. Didn't donate them, they just gave them to me then. And so these were those boards in all those Hobie stores. So over the years, I collected these boards in the Hobie stores, and we had all kinds of events. This was one of my favorite events. It was the volleyball tournament in Laguna, and so it was on the main beach, and I decided to promote the Hobie stores. I put we had all the best looking girls in town working for us, Miss Dana Point, Miss San Clemente, and I put Hobie on all their butts, and we took pictures and made a big promotion out of that, and I was in heaven because they had to play with me before they could go out and promote the stores. In the meantime, Hobie's building a 60-foot Power Cat. The Katie Sue was built in Dana Point down by the airport where his factory was. And one night it was all finished, and the superstructure, he had to make in two pieces because we couldn't take it down the road to get it in the Dana Point harbor put together. So we started about 10 at night, and took us all night to bring it down to the harbor in two pieces, put it together. This is the next morning with Hobie and Susan up here and all the rest of us hanging around. Put it in the water, and Wayne and all the rest of us got in the boat, and we took another boat out and tried it and got the motors running, and it was a great time and good fun on that boat. This is a 60-foot boat, and on a catamaran, Hobie made it the size that it is because he didn't want bunk beds. I mean, some of you I know have sailed a lot where, you're on a sailboat and you're in a bunk bed and you're trying to get your girlfriend on there and you're trying to get lucky and there's 10 other guys sleeping down there. And so Hobie said, I want a king-size bed, a king-size bed in each hull that you can walk around and make the bed. Because, on a bunk bed, you're hanging from one and trying to make it. So in this case, you could walk around. So that determined the width of the hull, which determined the length of the boat. And so instead of a 60-foot boat with, you know, bunks for 20, there's only would hold 4 people. Two people in each hull, and you're 20 feet apart. So you could yell and scream. There's a shower in each hull. And, you know, the upper deck here was the bar and the lounge. And then you'd go down the steps into the hull, into where the bedrooms were. So it was a fabulous boat for 2 couples sailing. And so in the meantime, I took up motorcycle riding. And this was when I was 60-something. I bought my first motorcycle and rode the Continental Divide on Tin Cup Pass. And then I would go up and play at Sun Valley and Aspen. By then, I'd lost Shirley and got a new girlfriend, a new dog, and a new motorcycle, and gone to Sun Valley. And that's all the runs at Sun Valley. And that was my latest dog, Chemo, some of you might remember. And in the meantime, more bike rides in the summer. And it got so popular that I formed, you know, they have the Colorado 500 in Colorado. Well, we have the Bloody Dick ride in Idaho. So I get 5 or 6 guys and take them all over the Continental Divide in Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho. And this was on one of our dirt bike rides. That was me crossing one of the rivers. It gets pretty deep in some of those. You're lucky to get across. A lot of the times you hit a round rock and you're upside down in the river. Then in the summertime, I'd go on bike rides, and Hobie would phone, take his boat up to Alaska. And so I'd fly up and meet him in Alaska, and we'd go for a 2-week cruise up to the different fjords in Alaska. This is Hobie, myself, and Susan, and my date inside the Hobie camp on one of our cruises. Another bike ride in between. I'm doing that all the time. And, well, that's a party. I don't know how that that's the same hat. See, that's my lucky hat. I'm wearing that tonight. Hoping somebody will get the message. Well, during that time, I met Spencer. Well, before that, I rented a desk in Laguna from Charlie, who's here tonight. Was right across from Bolton at the Art Museum. And Barry came to work for me. We started gathering historical information. Met Spencer and hooked up with him. And here we are in this building, and you'll recognize that in the early years. Here's another shot of the foundation and doing what we're doing, and hopefully it will continue to go on in perpetuity. And here's the last big party we had here with Hobie and Jimmy Lomas, Hobie's first employee, and Rennie and Phil and Mickey and myself, and enjoying the party. And here's a more recent picture down on Beach Road, the Poche Surf Club, which included Joe Dunn is here tonight, and Wayne, and Flippy, and John Creed, and Walter, me, and Chemo, and we still hang out here every Saturday and Sunday. So that's really about it. Thank you.